collective bargaining, administrator litigation, teacher litigation, and school administrator contracts to go into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it, Sally.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Elaine,
Yes.
Sally,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So 5-0, we are now in executive session. So I think the first thing we should probably take up is
Are we in
I ask for a motion to seal the minutes.
Motion to seal. Second, Sally.
Sally, Elaine, you made the motion,
Diane,
Diane did.
and Sally second. I'm going to do a
Yes.
roll call vote. Ms. Farnworth,
Yes.
Ms. Palish,
Yes.
Ms. Black,
Yes.
Ms. Pavo,
yes.
and I vote yes. So the minutes are sealed. I'm going to ask for everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I have a flag to display. So here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I've been shopping for that flag for about 3 weeks, and I finally found one today. All right. It must be because 4th of July is coming up. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the minutes of 6:15.
So moved.
Second, Sally.
Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Mrs. Pavo,
Yes.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth,
Yes.
Mrs. Palish,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So the minutes are approved. We are on item 6A, old business FY budget update. Dr. Sanquioni?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Finance, Amy Roderick, who has, I believe, sent you some documents outlining where FY20 is going to end. So, Amy?
Right. I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen again here. So let's see if this works. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So at the last meeting, I had provided a summary that looked identical to this, although the numbers were a little bit different. And I was asked to provide some detail for that, and which I will do in just a minute. Excuse me for 1 second. There we go. Okay, so as we go down, these are just the general categories where we had savings. In particular, transportation was one of the highest, we had some savings with some out-of-district placements, and then just some savings and substitutes and some other categories throughout the district, primarily as a result of COVID-19. Unfortunately, those were offset by some overages and expenses, most notably some out-of-district tuitions. Those are a combination of some tuitions for like the Met School in Rogers, that we had more students than I believe was originally budgeted. But then we also have some out-of-district tuitions for special education that is not related to the out-of-district placements. Those are, I believe, specialty services at different facilities that are provided to certain students. Between those two categories, the out-of-district tuition and the special education, we had a significant overage of about $613,000. So that's the main one I wanted to point out. We also, the other two categories that were fairly high were unemployment benefits. That was really wasn't budgeted according to what was, it was budgeted according to what was expected, but then the utilization was a little bit higher due to some non-renewals in FY19. Then of course the legal, also, we had so much budgeted, and then there were the actual invoices for all the matters that were going on. And then again, we have some other categories across the district where we had some overages, either due to utilization or just certain things that were not within our control at the time they were budgeted back in 2019. So for now, does anyone have any questions?
So I'm gonna give each one of the committee members an opportunity for questions.
Okay.
So Mrs. Farnworth first.
Thank you. So at a high level, you know, the big bang savings really was transportation.
Correct.
And the out of district placements, again, I understand how that is that COVID related? You may have said it. Is that COVID related?
That's my understanding from the folks at the region is that, yes, that is COVID related.
Okay.
We would
So
not have
now-
experienced that had COVID not occurred.
Okay. And were we on target for that line item pre-COVID?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Then on the overage side, the out of district tuitions, I know you made mention of them. It seems, my question, it has more to do with next year's budget.
Mhm.
Because obviously there's a miss there, right?
Yep.
Has that been rectified in next year's budget? Do we have a good handle on the number of students we expect to be utilizing out of district tuitions?
That is on my to-do list, Mrs. Farnsworth, that knowing sort of what I know now versus what I knew 6 or 8 months ago, I definitely have to reach out and get some more specifics to make sure we have a better handle on that. At the time when I did the budget, it was for all intents and purposes level budgeted, but again, with experience, it seems that whatever budget was created, I'm not sure what the basis was for that originally in 19 for 20, but there definitely is some additional work on my part to get a better figure on that for 21.
Okay. And it just makes me wonder, and I know, you know, we haven't gotten to any real discussion about reopening, but I wonder how the whole reopening planning, if it will have any kind of impact on this line item.
Correct. And I guess that is more research that I need to do in terms of, you know, we were billed effectively for all 4 quarters for each respective school, and as well as the East Bay Educational Collaborative. Will that look different next year? That's something that I have to dig into, and hopefully, you know, there is some, I want to say, proration if in fact we go back again through distance learning. So effectively 3 quarters of the year, the students were, you know, at those locations receiving those services directly in person. And it was the last quarter where it was sort of distance learning. And so depending on how those schools or agencies set up their programming for next year, I'll have to work with Sarah and Gina at the district to see if there's some, again, proration that might benefit us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mrs. Black, any questions?
No, that's a thing that we can track and follow, especially like Rogers and the Met School and all that. And then the question is what you just said, if they didn't receive the services, or did they, we can check that out too, to see if they went virtual on their end to our students that were going there, you know, that kind of thing. It's something different that we have to look into to make sure everyone's being, you know, served. And also try to keep them in district. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Black, I do believe that they received services
From there,
for the
from
last
Rogers and
quarter
the Met.
of 20, and I guess it's more of a question of, again, I believe they had to come up with a plan very quickly, like Tiverton did, and
Yes.
everyone was sort of muddling through the whole situation. But knowing what we know now versus what we knew 3 months ago, there's certainly more investigation I need to do for how things are going to play out for next year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you
You're
very much.
Mrs. Pava?
No questions.
Mrs. Palish.
So we saw recently, I think Mr. Duffy sent us over information about the FY20 state aid, and there was an increase to Tiverton.
Correct.
Are we going to be able to use that increase to offset some of these COVID-related costs?
So we need, Dr. Sanquioni and I need to sit down and decide whether it's to offset the current year costs or whether we're going to use that for FY21. I guess it's
It's same result.
the same result. So the answer, so the short answer is yes. And it goes into the bucket available for next year, whether through fund balance or whether we don't spend it and we spend it next year. Yes.
Okay, so we'll look at that. That'll be part of the 21 analysis at some point.
Correct. And I did not forward you folks the one-page summary I have, but I will present it here and forward it to you after the meeting's over.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, you could do it in another meeting too. I remember getting that email from him.
Yes. Yeah, I have that on the next page.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. And so, Amy, if I understand what you've just told us correctly, when the books close on June 30th, will be $12,700 over budget. Is that a fair?
As estimated, there's, yeah, so I, just to give some information, I actually have gone through object code by object code and done what as best a projection I can with actuals through this past Monday. And there are some estimates that I still had to make for the last week or so of the year. Maybe we'll get a bonus of $12,700 and we'll come out even, or maybe a little to the good. So it's.
But that was using fund balance to
Right.
I don't want anyone to think that it wasn't our revenue met our expenses. We had to use fund balance, a one-time plug of fund balance in order to balance. I just want to make sure
That
everyone
is
understands
correct. That is correct.
Right.
As was, as well as, you know, that was the one-time approval from the school committee to balance of 518,000 plus some additional key expenses during the year of, I want to say over 300,000. So there was a significant chunk of fund balance used, and any potential fund balance that we might retain, it just kind of goes back into that, including the 235,000. You know, it's just, we just sort of borrowed ahead of time, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
Right. I just want to make sure that, you know, we can't say it enough that this is, you know, we still have a structural deficit because we're using one-time revenue sources to basically cover our expenses.
And I could further illustrate that, Mrs. Palish, in the next slide for 21.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in? Just, I want to reiterate Ms. Palish's point. It's really not a deficit we're showing here. It's just the operation budget deficit. You had voted to use Medicaid and fund balance money to balance this year, and we didn't use as much as you had voted. So in the end, we're still ahead. It just doesn't look that way right now. Amy will show it to you in the next slide in the accounts that are higher than we anticipated them to be at the end of the year.
Okay. And have you accounted for any CARES Act money that's been distributed yet, or has any of it actually been distributed? I know we're supposed to be getting some.
So the CARES money was, for lack of a better phrase, folded into the additional state aid that we're getting for 20. So we had initially thought we were getting $194,000 of CARES money. And at the very beginning, we thought this was gravy, this was great. And then we learned that both the state was able to supplant some of their revenue shortfalls with that money. So the state revoted some extra funding for the schools and combined it with the CARES money, which is the $235,000 extra in state aid that we're getting that Mrs. Palish mentioned. So they
really only got $41,000. They just kind of put their stamp on the money that they were using as a pass-through.
Correct. We got a little bit more than we thought. We got about $40,000 more than we thought, so we'll take it. But yes, that's exactly right, which is what we expected when in previous meetings, when I mentioned, about supplanting versus supplementing. We had thought it was gravy, it was supplemental money, but the language in the CARES Act in this one instance is very different in that they said, sure, you can use this, you can supplant what we're giving you to replace other shortfalls that you have, which is very unusual for federal money.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay.
Any questions from the Mrs. Delport?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay, thank you. So, Amy, you have something else you want to present to us?
Well, this jumps to another item on the agenda, which is the FY21 budget. I don't know if you'd like me to go right there or you want me to wait.
I think we should probably finish up old business first.
Okay.
So I think the next thing then is the transportation bid. So you're up for that too, right?
I am. At this time, we're still not ready to make a recommendation. We just received today the language that they that First proposed for services under COVID, which is not a whole lot different than some of the recommended language that they had as part of their bid. And just today I submitted that to Vicki and Steve at Robinson and Clapham for them to help us iron out a more effective contract language that benefits us and is more flexible given what might happen, given the CDC's recommendations for September, whether we are in-person, distance learning, or blended, that sort of thing. So until I get that back, I'm really not comfortable making a hardcore recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Mrs. Black?
No.
Mrs. Pava?
No.
Mrs. Palish? Mrs. Barnworth?
Amy, when do you have until to get this contract settled?
We received an extension until July 12th. So I've asked the attorneys to get their information back to us within the next week or so that we can then move forward and submit the information and make a recommendation to the committee.
Okay, just want to put it out there. We are not scheduled to meet until after that.
Okay.
We are now.
Yeah, we may need to have a virtual meeting, even if we only have 4 members, I guess. We'll see. Okay. And I guess that's just me then. All right. I don't have any other questions. Any questions from the public, Mrs. Delcourt?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Thank you. Any questions from any of our administrators? There's at least 2 of them here, right? Nope. Okay. All right. So then we are up to new business, which is item 7A, preschool grant. Dr. Sanquioni?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I don't want to confuse this with a request I had made earlier this year for a preschool that we would fund by tuitions. There's actually a program that the state sponsors and pays for in entirety. And we had thrown a grant in a while ago, and I want to let Ms. Amy Donnelly Roach address this because she wrote the grant and we received the favorable response from the state on it. So Amy, why don't you explain to the committee where we're at?
Thank you. Yes, I'm so pleased that we have won a competitive grant. We wrote in partnership with the East Bay Community Action, Mr. Cabral, Heidi Norman from East Bay Community Action, and Linda La Liberty from East Bay Community Action. We collaborated on the proposal, and you have had in your packets, and I believe you have, if not, I can share my screen, letter from the governor, the commissioner, and the state director of human services, dated May 21st. It's been in packets previous to this as well under correspondence, noting that we have garnered the grant. This is the second year we applied, as Dr. Sanquioni noted, and We're all aware that universal pre-K is a national movement and part of the governor's agenda, part of her proposed budget annually. So this is the second year we applied, and usually they prioritize districts where there is a larger amount of social, emotional, and economic need. We are in what they consider to be sort of the second tier. So we're on the short list, if you will. Statewide, there were 60 such free universal preschool programs that are fully state funded in Rhode Island. This past school year, there are 95. There were 60 last year, there are 95 this year, and a huge state investment in this work. So we have not been guaranteed funding for this year. We will know July 10th if additional funding is there. But I can tell you that Middletown received the same kind of second tier letter a year ago, did not get funding, but got accepted and was on the short list, and they are funded for this year with the same partner in East Bay Community Action. So it's a wonderful opportunity. What it brings to Tiverton is a full day free preschool for children who are 4 by September 1st of the year it starts. We designed our proposal so that the program would be based at Ranger, yet open by lottery, and it's a state weighted lottery to any child of that age who lives in Tiverton. And free to families, free to our district. We provide, of course, the space, custodial, staffing, internet, et cetera. And East Bay Community Action does the hiring. So it's really exciting, and I'm so pleased that this is going to happen, if not this coming school year, in the following year.
Okay. Any questions, Mrs. Palish?
So Amy, you said we'll find out for this year, the 10th?
Yeah, they do prioritize, and the lotteries are weighted toward students with significant needs. Basically, we're on that second tier if there is funding.
So we'll know mid-July whether it'll be this year, and if not this year, we'll cross our fingers for next year.
Yeah, we're likely for next year.
Good, okay, thank you.
Ms. Pavo?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Black?
Thank you, Amy, for putting that in and working so hard on that. That's wonderful for the children. Thank you.
And Mrs. Farnworth?
Thank you for doing the legwork on this. I will point out, though, that it's, this July 10th date, I'm going to assume would have been predicated on a finalized state budget. And we all know state budget's not going to be anywhere near finalized by July 10th. So I think that makes it even probably, I don't want to rain on your parade, but
I think delaying it a year might be perfect with all the uncertainty we have anyway. But exactly. I'm just thrilled that it will be coming, and we will be among the districts who have a free universal pre-K.
Next year.
Likely.
Thank you.
Free is good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but again, thank you as well from me. Any questions or comments, Mr. Cabral? It's in your school, right?
Yes, it's at Ranger. We're looking forward to the program coming to Ranger at some point. This is the second year we've been on the waiting list.
Okay, well, someday, Manny, someday.
Someday.
Three strikes. You're going to get it next year.
Okay. Any questions from the public, Mrs. Delcourt?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then we are on item, I guess gotta click a screen here. FY21 budget, correct?
That is correct, Dr. Larkin. And we'll turn this right back to Ms. Roderick now, who will answer some. This will show you where some of this state aid money for CARES is going.
So,
Wait, Amy.
hey, I am unmuted. Okay. So, so basically, what I did was in the previous meeting, I had shown some scenarios of, if our current situation, if we didn't receive certain funding, and if the state aid for FY21 went quote unquote back to FY18 levels. All of that is still uncertain right now. We still don't know what's going to happen, other than just some of the general things that we've heard. And I wanted to show here sort of what we know and some of the contingencies, and that we're still left with a structural deficit. And then I'll talk quickly about sort of what we have in reserve. Again, one-time monies to handle that. So, excuse me. I wanted to point out that, I went back to our town and state aid for FY20, which is the 31,890,000, which at the present time is the town's maintenance of effort requirement. Unless they receive or seek and receive relief from that. And I had heard that they were seeking it, but I have not yet heard the status on that. So for the moment, I presumed that that would remain the same, which is the 31,890. Back in February and March, when we met with the budget committee, at that time, they had voted an increase of 2% overall, which comprised both state aid and which was a 2% over the 31,890. And then we have to deduct out of that the proposed state aid. So the town at the time was going to recommend $316,000 be added to the school's budget for FY21. However, that still needs to be voted on by the town whenever the FDR occurs. So as of right now, those funds are not guaranteed, or we don't know if they're guaranteed, or if someone's going to submit an alternative budget. Also, the state budget that came out, or the recommended budget that came out in January and February, we were hoping to see a $322,000 increase in state aid. And again, that full budget still needs to be enacted, as we know. So again, those funds are not necessarily guaranteed. We just spoke about the CARES money, which is the enacted FY20 state aid. That is the combination of sort of a revision in education funding as by way of folding in the CARES money. So all communications that I've had show that we will be getting the $233,000 for that. So if you take the maintenance of effort that's presumed and the other sources of funding, some of which are guaranteed, some are not, that's about 32.8 million. And our budget, even after some of the other cuts that we've already talked about and done, our budget is 33.5. That still leaves us, in the hole by about $800,000. Since we did not have, so let's presume for a moment, based on the slide I presented before, we had that $12,000 shortfall, if you want to call it that. For all intents and purposes, I'll call that even, given I'm sure there's some other things that go up or down in terms of invoices that we might receive between now and the end of the year, which is Tuesday. So assuming there's no change to fund balance from FY20, we had remaining after our one-time uses about $456,000 from available in fund balance. So we could use some of that or all of that, depending whether or not we want to keep a cushion. In addition to that, we also have the Medicaid funds that we did not draw down, that we were authorized to, but did not. So that if we keep the minimum that's required, we have to keep, I'm just going to round up, roughly $200,000, between $180,000 and $200,000. We then have roughly $600,000 available to fill that hole. But again, that's one-time money. And if we don't receive the appropriation from the town of $315,000, and if we don't receive the state aid as they've previously recommended, that adds another $600,000 to that hole. So that demonstrates sort of the structural deficit, even after we've cut to the bare bones. And we're hoping that folks can appreciate that position, as everyone and every state, local government and agency are in a similar position. But it's to operate the school district at a quality level for the kids. There's only so far we can cut. I believe we have done that, and Dr. Sanquioni and I and the administration have worked to do that. So I just wanted to show that we're still trying very hard, but that everything is still very much up in the air. And we're just hoping that things come back and that we figure out a way to get this done. So I'll leave it for questions at this point.
All right, I'm gonna, I guess, take the privilege and ask a question first.
Sure.
When you said something about we did not draw down some Medicaid money, I thought we had drawn down pretty much all of it.
So that's what Dr. Sanquioni was mentioning earlier, that so even though in the operating budget we $12,000 deficit, we did take down the fund balance, but due to some of the savings, even though it doesn't appear that way, based on the information I just provided you, we did not have to take down the Medicaid that we had anticipated. So we still have that balance. We still have that balance sitting in there for us to take down for next year.
Okay. All right. I'm going to open it to the rest of the committee. Mrs. Palish?
Hang on. Okay, so how much is that Medicaid balance?
It's just over 800,000, or it will be by the time we're done with the month.
Okay, and we had, I forget what we budgeted for.
597 and change. So I rounded it to 600.
Okay. So I guess, so we're looking at so we have about 800,000 and let's say another 400 in fund balance. So we have about 1.2-ish of one-time funds, but I am concerned because I'm looking at this and you said it, that 800,000, if the 316 goes away, and
right,
if the state aid goes away, and if they give relief to the maintenance of effort, that 800,000 quickly jumps to probably around 2.2 million.
Right. If I may bring up something that I presented at the last meeting, which is the various scenarios of what we have now, what if certain elements were missing, and if the funding, the maintenance of effort relief was granted, the deficit was at about 2.1 million, and then we would cover roughly some of that, let's call it $1 million at that point in time. And so it's the same sort of situation.
So I guess I have a question for Peter. Just from an operational standpoint, we are in a situation where we need to call back teachers. We need to, we need to come up with a plan, and we need to operate. And part of that operating plan is to call back teachers. And if we're not going to know what our budget is until, I'm hearing the General Assembly isn't going to be doing anything until the end of July, and then our FTR is 65 days after that, how are we going to, that just puts us in a really, I'm not sure how we get through that, not knowing what our budget is, yet we have to start school and call back teachers.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is, once we know what educational situation we're in, and we'll talk about that momentarily, we'll talk about the reentry plan, whether it's distance learning, partial or full, we know what teachers we need to call back. We just got to execute that, because we can't open without them.
But we have to balance our budget. So we can't just say we're going to just call everybody back. I mean, we have to have a balanced budget legally. So this is
call everybody back. I meant we have to call back the essential people that we need to have back to open.
So I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but again, are we going to use our worst case We almost have to.
No, I think, Deb, this is the whole issue. It's a conundrum. We cannot,
Well, and I think that's the point. I think we have to use our worst case scenario, and we have to go off of that until we know it's not going to be that. And which is unfortunate, but that's where we are.
which worst case scenario, the financial one or the teaching one? There's lots of.
I think we have to go with the worst case financial situation, and then, because, and then, I'm not sure, operationally, but you can't spend, we can't spend money that we don't know that we're going to have. So I think whatever scenario we come, whether it's A, B, or C for teaching and learning, we need to work off of that worst case scenario until we know it's not going to be that. Because once you call people back, they're back.
Right.
I don't disagree. I just still think it's so. I guess your question is, well, how, we have to call these teachers back to teach, but we don't have the money to pay them. So I'm not sure which point which one we do.
Well, I think what I heard Peter say was there are people, because we sort of did twice the amount that we need.
Right.
So we work off that worst case and we call back who we know we can absolutely call back.
Right. So you're right. I think that the layoffs and non-renewals assumed that some people were coming back. It was just that they had to be as broad as they were to maintain flexibility, both in terms of the model that we would be implementing on August 31st, which still is rather amorphous, as well as, of course, what state aid was going to be, and then there's the whole issue of the displacements.
Right. My point really just being the frustration that we don't have numbers, and that, we're kind of waiting on the General Assembly, we're waiting on Congress, we're waiting, and I get it. No one's been through this before, but it's we're dealing with the worst case scenario. We have to, and it's just, we're not going to know until August or September what really our budget's going to be. I don't think.
Well, in a way, what we really need, and this has struck me today during the Ryas Kassenfeld Institute. I was going to bring this up later, and we can talk about it later, but we need calendar relief. If they're not going to do something until July, how can we be held accountable, or how can we have a plan for August 31st? If we don't know what's going on with the pandemic, how can we really have a plan for August 31st? I think that may be actually where the state should be going, but unfortunately, no one's calling me to ask that, maybe school shouldn't start till September 30th. I don't know. Anyway, that took up, the oxygen. Elaine, questions?
No questions, but I agree with you. I think that I don't know, how are we going to be ready for on August 31st?
I don't know.
With all this out there on the table, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not optimistic either.
So if I may make a point, I brought up the slide while you folks were talking that I had presented at the last meeting. Current situation, if we were to get the same state aid as 2020, and then the worst case scenario. So Mrs. Palish, to your point, the 2.2 million, if we were going back to FY18 levels of maintenance of effort type thing. But I do want to point out as well that our estimated expenditure budget, the 33.5, is already reflects the 1.4 million we cut sort of in the beginning of the process, and also reflects, another $500,000 so in, other savings that we experienced, like in health insurance and some other things like that. So we have already cut or reduced, I should say, or benefited from cost reductions of close to $2 million. And so the 1.4, we did that early on, as Dr. Sanquioni has presented to you. And then in terms of to sort of confirm both what Dr. Larkin and Mrs. Palish were saying, that, we went with the worst case scenario, if you want to call it that, and had to lay off or furlough additional teachers in anticipation of the fact that if the funding really goes to worst case scenario or worse than that, we wouldn't be in a position to call those teachers back, even though it is our plan to call them back. So I want to make it clear that, we have really hit everything very, very hard. Staff, supplies, materials, maintenance, everything like that, in order to prepare for this. And yet we're still sort of hanging by a thread and have that, which demonstrates the structural deficit and the need for the use of one-time monies, which will not sustain us forever. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Black, questions?
Yes, no, I just think it's very important what Amy just pointed out and you've all been saying is that we cut before we even asked for, for anything. So that was a very reasonable ask at the time. And now I know everything's changed, but I also know we have to function. And
Right.
I think that we have a chance to have another FTR if we need it. I know we don't even have one in the first place, but I think in the charter, let's not forget that if we need money again, we have to go back to the people for it. And because everything's so up in the air, it's how can we make rational decisions to give the parents and the students exactly what they need and want right now. And that's what the dilemma is with all of us, And as you said, when we listened to that thing today on the state level, they had some great ideas and some great overarching concepts, but it's like you said, the date too soon,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and Mrs. Farnworth?
Okay, first, Amy, in the future, if you could include all of these slides in our packages, it would be very helpful. It's very difficult to think on the fly as we're watching these things. Secondly, Medicaid drawdown. Why are we not drawing down the Medicaid account for 2020?
Well, because
we had special ed expenses.
Mhm.
I mean, my own thinking on this is that we should endeavor to take those funds into our fund balance and have it available to us for 21. I don't know what any advantage of leaving the full amount that accumulated over this past year with the region.
that is an option that we can certainly do. Dr. Sanquioni and I discussed it, and we felt that it's fund balance at 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Not to sound cavalier, that it's available to us, and that we could take it down, whether it's in our fund balance or sitting in the Medicaid account.
The Medicaid account, the cash is held by whom?
My understanding is the region.
The region.
So
But
Diane, this came up last year, that exact question, and I think it's just been the practice of the district for 20 years to keep it there as a means of, because it was earmarked, if you will. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but for the fluctuations in special education primarily.
Mhm.
That I'm not defending or saying that was a good thing or a bad thing. I think it was just traditionally was held in that account because the fund balance was typically thought of as being more for capital projects.
But to Diane's point, since we had a special, it's and Amy's right, it's half a dozen of one and 6 of another. If since we had Medicaid overages this year and we saw it, is perhaps we should draw down those Medicaid funds, and then that would make our fund balance higher. And again, we're still going to get to the same number. I just don't want anybody to think there's extra money out there. If we don't draw down fund balance by 500,000 and we use Medicaid funds instead, we're still going to get to the same net total use of,
Right.
total funds available to us.
It's all fungible.
it's-
It is all fungible, Dr. Larkin.
I would like that I'm going to put on a future agenda.
Yeah, why don't you put it on an agenda, Diana? We can
This
talk.
is every single year this comes up, and we have the same discussion every time. And I don't think as a body that we have exerted any kind of control over it. And, we watched it grow to, what was it, a couple $1 million a few years ago. And I think, it needs to stay in the forefront and help to fund our special ed expenses. I mean, that's what it's for.
Okay.
Yep,
Then,
put it on an agenda.
yep. Also, the town at its meeting earlier this week adopted a 1/4 budget, and that would include us, so that they can send out tax bills. So as of right now, the same levy from fiscal 2020, 1/4 of it will be implemented for the first quarter of fiscal 21. Yeah, I don't know, Amy, have you been in touch with the town on that? And are they going to provide 1/4 of last year's funding to us at a level rate? I have no idea how that's going to work.
So typically, the way it works in general, they do not, quote unquote, advance us the funds, if you want to call it that. So we do it on for a lack of a better phrase, pay as you go. So when we have a payroll, we request a wire, they give us the money. When we have accounts payable, we send over the warrant, we sign it and say, can you give us the money to fund this? So I have not been in touch with Denise specifically about that, but I can reach out to her. Although my expectation would be that they wouldn't, again, be fronting us any money, that it would still sort of be on the same at request basis, up to 1/4's worth of what I believe would be, for now, I'm guessing the 31,890, but
Well, but that's not going to take into account what they would have gotten in state aid. So it's going to be $2 million less, whatever they would have been able to raise from the levy.
right.
No, it's 31,890. We get one number.
No, I understand that, but I'm just sort of saying the town is going to send out a tax bill for a quarter. The
Yeah.
amount of money that's going to generate into the town's accounts is not going to also have the money that would have come from the state. That's all. It's not a.
Dr. Larkin, you're right. We will hopefully most likely get all of the 31,890. It just depends on when the town receives the state aid on our behalf.
But
Correct.
yeah, that's a good question. Amy, talk to Denise.
I will.
Diane, did you have any other questions? You had the floor, actually.
I guess, to go back to the topic of, and I know we have an agenda item for reopening, so I don't even want to, in this particular agenda item, go into any of the nitty gritty there, but, we have yet to even fully take the actions needed to affect all the worst case scenario savings. And so I think how we develop that reopening plan and finally come to some kind of budget will be very much how we can manage our expenses into 21. There's just so much up in the air right now. I don't even know how we're going to effectively open.
Well, the way you could put that is there's yet another set of worst case scenarios that have nothing to do with the budget, but have to do with opening.
Exactly.
There's a set of worst case scenarios that have to do with the pandemic.
Yeah.
So there's worst case scenario everywhere we turn, and we don't have some of the concrete information because we don't. And I think that's going to be the point of I think this entire year, if not further into the future is going to be kind of a nimble, iterative process whereby we're going to have to change. We actually got some experience doing that this spring, but we're going to have to probably be changing our thoughts about things, on a monthly basis. So anyway, anything else, Diane?
No, thank you.
All right. I think I probably said my piece. Did I cover everybody? Think so?
I just, one more thing.
Yeah.
Diana commented that we watched Medicaid fund balance build. We actually didn't because it was building, but it was not really brought to the attention of the school committee, not until Dr. Sanquioni and now Amy started. So I want to thank you both. I think we'll have the conversation about whether we should draw it down is different, but I want to thank you both for bringing it to our attention. What it is, how much it is, what we're doing with it. That's fantastic. Thank you.
That's
That is
true.
also
Deb. That's very true. Yeah.
It built at a steady rate over about 20 years. And you're right, it wasn't very well, it certainly wasn't brought to our attention, I would say. And, without having it brought to your attention, it's hard to know to go to look for it either. So,
Right.
All right. Any other questions from our administrators present? Okay. Any questions from the public, Mrs. Delcourt?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
All right. Thank you, Amy. You're getting a lot of interesting experiences, right?
And still loving every minute of it. So it's great.
Well, that's good. I'm glad.
Thank you. All right.
You didn't tell me I would have this much fun.
None of us quite knew that, I think. All right. So we are on item 7C, reopening plans. Dr. Sanquioni.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know I sent you a 34-page document that kind of outlines all the guidelines that we need to follow about reopening. And thank you, Dr. Larkin and Ms. Black, for joining the administrative team last Monday when we first started to analyze this in depth. I certainly can't summarize all the information in our meeting right now, but I just want to give you a high overview and then the logistics of getting to the final plan. So in the big picture, we have to develop a plan for 3 scenarios. The first scenario being what we just exited, which is distance learning. So we have a lot of experience with that. I think we learned things we can do and things we can do better. We have to develop a plan for partial in school, which meaning some of our students are here and some of our students are at home. And there's myriad of iterations of how that could be based on the high school, middle school, and elementary, and grade levels or classes that are split, things of that nature. And then lastly, we have to develop a plan for full in school so everyone comes back. But within those scenarios, we've got restrictions that we have to work around. For example, recess. We have to keep stable populations 14 feet apart. Classrooms, if we switch classes, we have to clean and wipe the tables down and the desk downs between every class. Busing. We can only have 1 student per seat, 25 students per bus. So even in full operation, 25 students on a bus that sometimes we have buses of 60 and 70, we're trying to figure that out right now, how we can do this. Dining, again, same situation for dining. If we bring in stable populations, they have to have 14 feet of separation. If they're not a stable population, which means they change classes like at the high school, then it's a 6-foot separation. And so just think of our spaces now and think of how we get all these kids in. We have to have a screening protocol if a student arrives to school sick or a teacher arrives to school sick. We have to have a protocol if one of our teachers gets COVID and now is going to be quarantined for 14 days or longer. We have to have programs and stipulations for our before school program. We're going to have to talk to Ms. Pavo about our after school program because there's all kinds of rules and regulations there. I know one of the questions I get a lot is sports. What are we doing with sports? And there's no guidance on that yet. So I can't even answer that question. So I'm going to pause there as well. Let me get to the logistics now. So administratively, we've met and we've constructed a committee to meet with us, which is going to meet Tuesday at 6 p.m. We have invitations going out to those people. We've got a large committee. I believe there's about 70 people coming in person and another 20 or so who are going to join us on Zoom. We are going to divide that group into 3 separate groups, so 3 stable groups, so we meet COVID guidelines. We will have one group in the library, one group in the auditorium, another group in the gymnasium, all 6 feet apart. And then we divided our administrative team. So one administrator team is going to we're going to rotate amongst the groups so the group stays stable. And we'll talk about distance learning. And another group of administrators will talk about partial, and another group of administrators will talk about full in person. So we'll try to elicit a conversation and get feedback on all those 3 scenarios. We'll then set future meetings moving forward from that. Certainly we have to get a meeting with the school committee so you can approve the plan, or it has to be submitted on July 17th. So I would summarize, we're in a good place to start. I think we jumped on this right away. Our initial meeting with the administrative team, we've already identified some of the issues we've got to deal with, some of the things we have to overcome. But as we start to view it, we see the potential for all 3 plans, and I think we could execute all 3 plans if we were faced with either whatever the situation is on August 31st. If we're given the green light for everyone coming in, I think we can pull that off. If we're partial, we can pull it off, and if we're distance learning, we can pull it off. So I'll pause there. It's a lot, and certainly we'll get into a lot more depth with you as the plan is developed.
Peter, I'm going to ask one quick question, then I'll open it up to the committee. Are there any students that are going to be involved in the committees?
Yeah, Mr. Ashley has recruited some high school students. They should be there Tuesday night.
Great, thanks. So, Mrs. Pavo, any questions?
No.
Okay. Mrs. Black?
Yes, I'd like to say that the meeting Monday was good. Everyone seemed quite comfortable. Of course, a lot of questions unanswered, and then the thing we watched today, which you're going to talk about, Dr. Larkin, was very good, the Hassenfeld Institute. And I think they said it's going to be available. And if you have time, please watch it, because it was an overarching guiding principle show of different ways to organize and great ideas. Like the IKEA, they said you love to go to IKEA because it's not the nicest, but you put it together yourself so you have ownership, and that's what we're doing. We're inviting everyone in. They said don't just have it for top down and just get together and throw something out there with PowerPoints and everything. And I think it's great that we're getting all the community involved. I've never seen the turnout like this, and I'm so excited about it. And I know everybody's anxious, but I know that we can do a good job with this, and I think we did already. Thank you.
Thanks. Mrs. Farnworth?
Well, first question, and Sally, you've mentioned a meeting from Monday. What meeting was that?
It was the administrators meeting on Monday at the school in the library. Jerry sent something out about going to it.
We invited Diane, and then we couldn't have more than 3 people.
We couldn't have more than 3, so I said if someone else comes online, I would have left. That's how we would have managed it. So there wasn't a quorum there.
Thank you.
Okay.
One of the topics we all watch the news, and when the governor announced that we would be shooting to be back in session on August 31st, it was with a great amount of optimism. And indeed, Governor Baker did a similar type of, took a similar approach today. As a matter of fact, their school districts are also required to turn in plans for 3 different scenarios, all very familiar. But, in talking to people, I'm not really convinced that everyone is as optimistic as our leaders are. So it should be interesting to see how it really does come down by August 31st. One of the, on the fiscal side, I keep hearing different things regarding transportation. Now, I know when we last met, I don't know if it was that meeting or before, we were talking about the fact that it's in state law right? That we provide transportation. I'm hearing districts now are just today, the city of Warwick, they're actually proposing that they eliminate busing for all but those students with special needs and IEPs. And then I was reading through the guidance from the state, and indeed they are asking districts to think, for how we can be flexible in that regard. And I certainly hope we do. I mean, Dr. Sanquioni, you put it right on the spot, right? We can't have more than one child per seat on a bus. And so our capacity is going way down. And my question is, how can we manage getting the children to school with transportation that need it? Is there a way that we can perhaps, poll parents or have some kind of an opt-in, opt-out type of system? Is that something that you're planning to address with this committee, or have you already given that any thought?
Yeah, no, that keeps me up at night a lot. We have a survey all set to go to parents. I want to execute that after the meeting Tuesday night, because we do want to put it out there a little bit and see the reaction of parents. At the high school, to be honest with you, at the high school level, I sat with our bus company, and we feel like we could get everyone in with 25 students on a bus, which is one per seat. At the elementary, I'll take the easy two. The elementary level, we're designating, we're going to consider, and I'll bring it to your attention, a number of streets that are now busing walking to school. So something like this, to your extent, to your point, we feel that this can be safely accomplished, which hopefully can get those elementary numbers down. The middle school is our biggest problem. Where the middle school location is. No one can walk to the middle school. And so now we're thinking about maybe, and again, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but maybe moving some middle school kids to the high school buses. And that throws the timing off on the schools a little bit. But if we want to be if we want all 1,800 of our school students in, these are the things we're going to have to consider to do. So am I thinking about it? Yes. Is there a myriad of solutions? Yes. And we're going to talk about it, over the next week with a multitude of people, and we're going to bring our ideas back to the school committee.
Thank you. To you and the work you've done so far, I'm sure you're not on any kind of vacation yet, and I don't even know if you're going to get one this summer, to be honest. But I want to thank you for the efforts that you've made so far with the administration, and I look forward to seeing the outcome of these community collaborative conversations. Thank you.
Ms. Palish?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I have a myriad of questions, but I really want to wait and see what the committee comes back with, because I'm sure you have the same ones. So thank you all for your work, and I look forward to seeing what you bring to us.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from the public, Mrs. Delcourt?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay, thanks. So just a reminder, the meetings are on Tuesday, or the meeting is on Tuesday, and Mrs. Black and I will be attending. I'll just, I guess, make a couple comments. I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is how comfortable are parents and staff going to be coming back at all. And it would almost seem to me to make sense to not commit to a particular model yet, but I would almost also think that maybe what we should be doing is doing distance learning at the beginning of the year, and then going to a hybrid, and then maybe going to a full opening. I think it's going to be very difficult to go from full session back to distance learning, or hybrid back to distance learning completely, especially when there are so many unknowns. But I guess we'll wait till Tuesday. So again, and thank you for all of the work that you and all of the administrators have been doing, and all the teachers and the parents and students will be doing on Tuesday. Any other questions?
Yeah,
or
just, Tuesday's the start. I guess we're not going to come with the answer Tuesday.
Yeah. How long is the meeting going to be on Tuesday, by the way?
So each group is going to, we circulate, so each topic is explored for 45 minutes. So what's that, 2 hours, 15 minutes?
Okay. Okay. Thanks. So then we are up to item 7D, approval of the 2020-2021. Okay.
So I'm going to ask the committee not to approve that this evening, but just call your attention to it, and I'll explain to you why. So it's a state adopted calendar, and we've got multiple iterations. We came out with a copy initially from the state. They came back and plugged in some holidays and said you had to take these days out. Then they came back and said, nope, you don't have to take those days off. So the calendar you look at really replicates what Tiverton has done over the years. It brings us in on the same day we were planning on. It allows us to have our PD days before. It has the full February vacation week off, which is a little different, but it still gets us out on June 16th. The reason I'm not going to have you vote it tonight is we need to work out our parent-teacher conferences. And so rather than you vote it and me come back to you and change it around a little bit, if we could just wait out a couple weeks, hopefully I can get that settled and we'd be good to go.
Why should that be different than anything else?
I guess what I would say, thank you, is
It's in flux.
But I would say to this calendar that we're starting on the 31st, and these are the days we're in school. So that part, if a parent's looking at this, they can take that with certainty. The only thing that might switch is a couple, parent-teacher conference nights, but everything else is etched in stone.
I don't think the 31st is etched in stone anymore.
You don't, huh?
Nope.
Okay.
All right. So I think that's it. I think before we adjourn, we probably should discuss when we're next meeting. So the bus approval, I think you said was July 17th?
July 17th is the distance learning plan, or the
Oh,
reopening plan.
July 12th is when we have to award, is the date by which we have to award the bid.
so it seems we need to meet someday the week of July 6th.
Yeah, because the 12th is a Sunday, so.
Is there any particular day in that week that's good or bad for people?
Amy, do you think later in the week, or it's probably not going to matter that week?
I would think later in the week. I'm hoping for the attorneys to get back to me by the end of next week, but then there's also the holiday. So, Wednesday or Thursday is probably better.
Should we do
Thursday the 10th.
Thursday the 10th.
I think that's
Or
Thursday the
and I
9th.
can get the documents to you ahead of time.
Thursday's
Thursday's the 9th, yeah.
Thursday the 9th.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking, yeah, this calendar does it a little bit. Okay, so Thursday the 9th.
And we'll do 6 again?
Yeah.
Okay, it's in.
All right, that was easy. Anything else? I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, Sally.
Mrs. Farnworth,
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo,
Yes.
Mrs. Black,
Yes.
Mrs. Powell.
Yes.
I vote yes, so we are adjourned. Good night. Thanks.
Night, everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.